600 miles of open ocean in every direction. No rivers, no farmland, no natural resources. Hurricane Alley. 60,000 people live on a coral island smaller than Manhattan, paying some of the highest costs on Earth to stay. That's not loyalty, it's engineering, and it starts with the roofs. Pull up a satellite view of the western Atlantic and scan south from New York. You'll pass the Jersey Shore, the Outer Banks, then nothing. Hundreds of miles of open water. And then, roughly at the latitude of Savannah, Georgia, a speck appears, a fishhook-shaped chain of islands so small that if you blinked at the wrong zoom level, you'd scroll right past it. That's Bermuda. 21 square miles of dry land. Roughly the same footprint as Manhattan, except Manhattan has bridges, tunnels, and an entire continent bolted to it. Bermuda has the Atlantic Ocean, and that's it. The nearest coastline is Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, over 600 miles to the west. The nearest Caribbean island is even farther. Bermuda isn't in the Caribbean at all, despite what most people assume. And here's the part that makes the whole thing stranger. Bermuda shouldn't be warm. It sits at roughly 32 degrees north, the same latitude as Savannah, but also the same as the deserts of North Africa and the dry plains of central China. At that latitude in the middle of an ocean, without intervention, you'd expect something windswept, chilly, and gray for half the year. What you get instead is subtropical. Mild winters, warm summers, palm trees, turquoise water. The intervention is the Gulf Stream. That massive conveyor belt of warm water sweeps up out of the Caribbean and passes directly over Bermuda's underwater pedestal, keeping temperatures well above what the raw latitude would deliver. Take away that current, and Bermuda is a cold rock nobody visits. And it is a rock, but not the kind most people picture. Bermuda isn't a volcanic peak poking above the waves like Hawaii or Iceland. The volcano that built the original seamount went extinct millions of years ago and sank beneath the surface. What sits above water today is a coral limestone cap, a layer of reef and sediment that organisms built on top of the drowned summit over geological time. The rock people live on is biologically constructed. The foundation is volcanic. The surface is ancient reef. Stand on a Bermuda hilltop and you're standing on coral, not lava. That geology matters because it solves one problem and creates another. Limestone is easy to cut, easy to shape, and incredibly durable in salt air. Bermudians have been quarrying it for centuries, building houses out of the ground they stand on. Those famous pastel-colored buildings aren't painted concrete. They're hand-cut limestone blocks, whitewashed and topped with stepped roofs designed to catch every drop of rain that falls. And rain is the entire water supply. That's not an exaggeration. Bermuda has no rivers, no freshwater lakes, no reliable aquifer. The island is too small, too porous, and too exposed to hold a traditional groundwater system. Every glass of water anyone drinks on that island started as rainfall, hit a roof, ran through gutters, and ended up in a storage tank underneath the house. This isn't some folk tradition that a few old families still follow. It's law. Every building on Bermuda is required to have a white-stepped limestone roof designed for rainwater catchment, connected to a tank with minimum storage capacity scaled to the size of the structure. The white coating reflects sunlight to keep the roof cool and the catchment surface clean. The step design slows the flow and maximizes collection area. The whole system is engineered, codified, and non-negotiable. You don't build on Bermuda unless your roof can drink. Think about what that means for a settlement. Every other place this size, this isolated, with this little natural water, either stayed empty or collapsed. Bermuda turned its buildings into infrastructure. The house is the reservoir. And because the limestone is local, the building material is practically free. The island bootstrapped its own survival out of coral and rain. Now layer the storms on top of that. Bermuda sits in a well-known hurricane corridor. Atlantic storms sweep through these latitudes regularly, and the island has taken direct hits that would flatten a typical Caribbean wood frame town. Those same limestone and cement houses, with their heavy stone roofs and thick walls, are essentially bunkers. The architecture that catches the rain also resists the wind. One system, two survival functions. Those pink sand beaches showing up in every travel photo aren't a geological feature, they're biological. The pink tint comes from crushed shells of tiny organisms called foraminifera, ground into the sand by wave action over centuries. The beach is made of dead animals, and the island is made of ancient reef, and somehow all of it adds up to one of the most photographed coastlines in the Atlantic. From a satellite, Bermuda still looks impossible, a sliver of coral in empty ocean for the better part of 1,000 miles in every direction. No river, no farmland, no oil, no timber, no ore. The highest natural point is only about 260 feet above sea level. You can drive the full length of the island chain in under an hour, and you won't break 21 miles per hour doing it, because the speed limit across the entire territory won't let you. But the 60,000 people living there aren't surviving on fish and rainwater. They're earning some of the highest per capita incomes on Earth, and the industry paying those salaries has almost nothing to do with beaches, tourism, or anything you can see from the shoreline. Most people hear Bermuda and think cruise ships, rum drinks, shorts with blazers, maybe a golf trip. Tourism is real, and it matters, but it's the second economy. The first one is almost invisible from the beach, and it's enormous. Bermuda is one of the largest insurance and reinsurance markets on the planet. Not per capita, not for its size. One of the largest, period. The island holds hundreds of billions of dollars in insurance and reinsurance capital, managed out of a handful of low-rise office buildings along the waterfront in Hamilton, the capital city, which is itself barely bigger than a few downtown blocks. Here's what that means in plain terms. When a hurricane wipes out a coastline in Florida, or an earthquake levels a district in Japan, or a cargo ship sinks in the Indian Ocean, the companies that pay those claims need their own insurance, a backstop behind the backstop. That second layer is called reinsurance, and a staggering share of the world's reinsurance is domiciled, priced, and managed from a 21 square mile coral island in the middle of the Atlantic. The irony is almost too clean. The island that sits directly in the path of Atlantic hurricanes is the same island that insures the rest of the world against them. Bermuda doesn't just endure catastrophic risk. It underwrites it, packages it, and sells it for profit. The geographic vulnerability became a professional credential. These are people who understand storm damage because they live inside the zone. So how did a tiny British territory in the open ocean become a global financial hub? 3 things lined up, and none of them were accidental. First, the tax structure. For decades, Bermuda charged no corporate income tax, no personal income tax, and no capital gains tax. The government funded itself through payroll taxes, import duties, and fees, not through taxing profits. For an insurance company choosing where to set up shop, that was a massive advantage. Every dollar of premium income that would be taxed at 30 or 40% in New York or London landed in Bermuda at 0. Second, the legal and political environment. Bermuda is a British overseas territory with English common law, a stable parliamentary government, and centuries of institutional continuity. For an industry built on trust and contract enforcement, that matters. You're not parking billions in a jurisdiction where the rules might change overnight. Third, and this is the part people overlook, the time zone. Bermuda sits in the Atlantic time zone, 1 hour ahead of New York and 4 hours behind London. When it's 9 in the morning in Hamilton, it's 8 in Manhattan and 1 in the afternoon in the city of London. For 4 or 5 hours every business day, Bermuda overlaps with both of the world's largest financial centers simultaneously. That window is worth more than any tax break. Put those 3 together on a small, English-speaking, politically stable island with direct flights to the East Coast, and you have a magnet for global capital that no amount of remoteness can neutralize. The money reshaped everything. Bermuda's GDP per capita is among the highest in the world, routinely cited in the same range as Luxembourg and Switzerland. Except that Luxembourg borders 3 major European economies and sits on a continent with high-speed rail. Bermuda borders the ocean. There is 1 airport, 1 main road, and no highway. And the money didn't just arrive once and level off. It surged after disasters. After September 11th, 2001, the global insurance market was in shock. Massive claims, enormous uncertainty, not enough capacity to cover what came next. Within months, a wave of new reinsurance companies incorporated in Bermuda to fill the gap. The industry calls them the class of 2001. Then Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005, and the same thing happened again. Another wave of startups, another flood of capital, another class year. When catastrophe strikes somewhere else, Bermuda doesn't contract, it grows. Money doesn't flee the rock, it pours in. That cycle created a gravitational pull on people, too. Thousands of the workers in Bermuda's international business sector aren't Bermudian. They're expats, actuaries, underwriters, lawyers, accountants, brought in on employer-sponsored work permits. They're well paid. They spend heavily on the island. They pay payroll taxes, and when their contracts end, most of them leave. The rock in the middle of nowhere functions, in practice, like a rotating financial outpost. Meanwhile, tourism, the thing most people assume is Bermuda's lifeblood, has actually declined from its peak. The glory years of Bermuda tourism were the 1970s and 80s, when the island was the East Coast vacation of choice. Visitor numbers have never fully recovered to those highs. But the population didn't decline with them, because by the time tourism softened, the insurance and reinsurance industry had already replaced it as the economic anchor. That's the answer to the first layer of the title question. 60,000 people don't cling to a rock because they love the sand. They stay because they're sitting on one of the most concentrated pools of financial capital on Earth, hidden behind a vacation brochure exterior. But extraordinary income on a tiny island with no room to expand creates its own problem, a brutal one. Where does everybody live? Who gets to stay? Bermuda's answer is one of the most restrictive residency systems anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. If Bermuda were an ordinary wealthy island, you already know what would have happened. Foreign money would have flooded in, bought up every beachfront lot, and priced out the locals. It's happened across the Caribbean. It's happened in Hawaii. Bermuda got discovered decades ago. It never happened. The reason is a legal architecture so restrictive that most Western democracies wouldn't even attempt it. Bermuda rolled out the red carpet for foreign money and simultaneously built a wall around foreign residency. That contradiction isn't a flaw in the system. It is the system. Non-Bermudians can only purchase from a narrow, government-approved category of higher-value homes that meet a minimum annual rental value threshold. The international business sector runs on imported talent, but every worker is there on a temporary, employer-sponsored permit. The employer must demonstrate that no qualified Bermudian is available. The permits have fixed terms. They do not, for most holders, lead to permanent residency. When your contract ends, you leave. At the center of the whole system is Bermudian status, the right to live, work, and own property without restriction. It passes primarily through birth and descent. It is not available through investment, marriage alone, or length of residency in the way that citizenship works in most countries. You can live on Bermuda for 20 years on a work permit and still have no path to status. The island is one of the few places in the Western world where spending decades as a tax-paying resident does not entitle you to stay. The result is visible on the ground. Housing costs are staggering. A gallon of milk, a bag of groceries, a tank of gas, everything arrives by container ship or cargo plane, and the import markups are brutal. The high salaries the insurance sector pays aren't luxury wages, they're compensatory. Electricity rates are among the highest in the world. For local families without international business salaries, the squeeze is real, and it feeds a tension that runs beneath the island's manicured surface. Then there's the density problem that money can't solve. Bermuda enforces a limit of 1 private car per household under the 1951 Motor Car Act. That's not an environmental statement, it's physics. The island is 21 square miles connected by narrow, winding roads. Traffic crawls at the island-wide speed limit of 21 miles per hour. Tourists can't rent cars at all, though in recent years the island has introduced small electric rental vehicles as a limited workaround. The system works, but it carries a cost. Younger Bermudians leave the island for university. They have to, since Bermuda has limited higher education, and a meaningful number don't come back. They land in London, Toronto, and New York, and discover that groceries cost a third of what they did at home, and that apartments have more than 1 bedroom. The brain drain is slow, but it's real, and it creates a demographic tension the fortress can't simply legislate away. You can prevent outsiders from staying, but you can't prevent your own children from leaving. The fortress doesn't just keep outsiders out, it locks insiders in, gently, by making their stake irreplaceable. Leaving means surrendering a position that can't be repurchased, in a place that won't let you back in on the same terms. But a fortress, no matter how well designed, still has to survive what's coming over the wall. The Atlantic is warming. The tax rules that built the whole machine are under global pressure. And the single industry holding 60,000 lives in place is facing questions it hasn't had to answer before. Start with the ocean. Bermuda's highest natural point sits roughly 260 feet above sea level, so the island isn't vanishing beneath the waves. But sea level rise doesn't need to drown a place to damage it. As ocean levels creep upward, salt water pushes into the thin freshwater lens beneath the limestone. Storm surges reach farther inland. Atlantic storms are intensifying, carrying more moisture, maintaining strength farther north. Bermuda has always been in the crosshairs. The crosshairs are getting tighter. And here's the uncomfortable irony buried inside all of it. The industry that funds Bermuda's entire existence is the business of pricing exactly this kind of risk. The reinsurance companies in Hamilton spend their days modeling hurricane tracks and calculating sea level exposure for coastal properties around the world. They know precisely how vulnerable a small Atlantic island is. They write the reports, they run the models, and then they walk outside into the place the models describe. The global tax landscape is shifting too. For decades, the zero corporate tax model was the centerpiece of the pitch. But the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has been pushing a global minimum corporate tax rate of 15%, aimed squarely at jurisdictions like Bermuda. The island responded by introducing its own corporate income tax, a historic reversal for a territory that had never taxed corporate profits in its entire existence. The move was defensive. Better to collect the tax yourself than let other countries claw it back under the new international rules. But the deeper question isn't whether Bermuda can adapt its tax code. It's whether the tax code was the only reason the industry was there. If the rate advantage narrows, and it already has, does a reinsurance company still need to operate from a coral island 600 miles from the nearest coast? Or does Miami make more sense? Dublin? Singapore? The consolidation trend in global reinsurance means fewer, larger firms, and larger firms tend to centralize in places with more connectivity. Not a collapse, a thinning. Bermuda has tried to adapt. During the pandemic, the island launched a residency certificate program aimed at remote workers, a 1-year permit allowing people to live on Bermuda while working for employers elsewhere. It ran for several years before being wound down in early 2025, replaced by longer-term residency applications. Even that small, controlled opening in the fortress wall was designed on Bermuda's terms. Money in, roots out. Classic Bermuda. But even the adaptations reveal how thin the margin is. Nearly all of Bermuda's energy comes from imported fossil fuel. Electricity prices run several times the American average. Every calorie of food, every gallon of fuel, every piece of construction material arrives by ship or plane across 600 miles of open water. A sustained hurricane season, a shipping disruption, a spike in fuel costs. Any of these exposes the supply chain instantly. There is no backup warehouse on the other side of the island. There is no other side of the island. And yet, when Bermudians have been asked directly whether they want to change the fundamental structure, whether they want independence from Britain, whether they want to tear down the fortress and rebuild, they've said no. A referendum on independence failed decisively. The population looked at the system, looked at the risks, looked at the alternatives, and chose to keep what works. Not because they think the system is perfect, because they've done the math. And the math says that what Bermuda has, the legal framework, the British connection, the institutional trust, the controlled population, the concentrated wealth, cannot be replicated anywhere else. You can't build a second Bermuda. You can only leave the one that exists. That's the answer the title was really asking for. 60,000 people refuse to leave a rock in the middle of nowhere because the rock isn't what it looks like from a distance. From a satellite, it's a speck, a sliver of coral in an empty ocean. No rivers, no resources, no hinterland, no margin. From the inside, it's a vault. Engineered over centuries, fortified by law, powered by an industry that chose isolation as a feature, sustained by a population that turned rain into water and reef into walls and geography into leverage. The ocean is rising. The tax rules are tightening. The next generation is asking whether the fortress is a home or a cage. The rock will still be there. The coral and limestone have outlasted everything the Atlantic has thrown at them for millennia. Whether 60,000 people will still be standing on it is a question the models in Hamilton's offices can price but never quite answer.